Welcome to this service, our first Sunday in May. You may have noticed that the slide says the 4th. I think that was yesterday, so we are at the 5th, but you are welcome whatever the date. We're glad that you have joined us. The title of the lesson this morning is Go Make Disciples. If you remember, last Sunday, we talked about coming and being a disciple. So from come be a disciple, we have now gone to go make disciples. Let's review just briefly some of the things that we said last Sunday. The invitation that Jesus extends to all people is to come to him and be one of his disciples. The word for disciple is mathetes. It means to be a follower, a learner, a pupil, an adherent. You see, disciples were people who followed the master and tried to be like he was, to adhere to what he said. Jesus today wants disciples. He wants followers and not fans. I think there are a lot of folks who are fans of Jesus. Yay, Jesus. They talk about Jesus. But when it comes to being a follower, that's tough. And they would rather cheer from the sidelines than actually get down and follow him. We talked about the requirements last week of being a disciple. It's not an easy thing. It requires us to die to ourselves. It requires us to deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow him. But we also pointed out that there are rewards of being a disciple, both in this life and in the one to come. Friends, being a disciple is a journey. It's not something you just do in a day. It's not you just do this thing and you're a disciple. It's a process. It's a journey of growth and development. Now, God expects something, Christ expects something of those who are becoming disciples. He expects us to go disciple. Disciples are to disciple others. John Wesley, how many years ago was that, said, "The church changes the world not by making converts, but by making disciples." I think that's right. We change the world by disciples making disciples. Now, the early church took this seriously. The reading from Acts chapter 8 had to do with the persecution that arose because of Saul at that time, who was putting men and women in prison, and they were fleeing for their lives. And verse 4 says, "Those who were scattered went everywhere preaching the gospel." If you look at that in a Greek New Testament, it would say, as they went, they preached. It was a natural thing. They were disciples. And as they were even fleeing for their lives, wherever they went, they tried to disciple others. Now, what I want us to do today may be a bit strange to you at first thought. I want to go back to that passage that we call the Great Commission. Tim read it for us from Matthew 28. I want us to look at it more carefully. Sometimes we need to look at familiar passages more carefully, because we may assume that they say some things and mean some things that they do not mean. Let's look first of all at the commissioner. If we're talking about a commission, there has to be a commissioner. Has to be somebody who says, here's what you are to do. In Matthew 28, without doubt, the commissioner is Jesus Christ. And he says that he has all authority. I remember memorizing this from the King James. It says, all power. Authority is a better translation. Exousia. It means that he has the right to command. Now, this authority was delegated to him. There are two kinds of authority. There is inherent authority that you have just because of who you are. There's delegated authority that somebody gives you. Jesus' authority was given to him by the Father. The Father said, I give you all of the authority to do what you need to do, to carry out what work I have for you. Matthew 7:29 says that he taught them as one having authority, not as the scribes and Pharisees. There was something different about Jesus and the way he spoke. What follows are what we often call the disciples' marching orders, or the Lord's marching orders. The commissioner says, I want you to do something. I have the right to charge you with doing this. So the commissioner is Jesus Christ. Who are the commissioned? If we have a great commission, who does it apply to? Disciples. If you read verse 16, it says, these words were spoken directly to the 11. Judas had not been replaced yet. And we say, well, does that mean me? I'm not one of those original 11. Jesus didn't speak those words directly to me. At the end, he says, and lo, I will be with you always, even to the end of the age. Dispensation, period of time. They were, of course, in the Christian age, the last age of mankind. There will not be another age. We started off in Bible history with the patriarchal age, when God spoke to the fathers of the family, the patriarchs. It was followed by the Mosaical age, when God spoke to the people through Moses. And then finally there was the Christian age, when God speaks today through his Son, as revealed in the Word. That's the age. You know what? I'm still in that age. I'm a disciple in that age. It must mean that these words then apply to me. I think disciples today, people like you and me, are commissioned to be disciplers. Colossians 1:23 says that the gospel had been preached to the whole world. That means that the gospel had gone everywhere, and that people had the opportunity to hear it and believe it and obey it. It was not just held in a small section of the world, because Jesus had commissioned them to go into all the world. Romans chapter 1 and verse 16, which is the theme verse for Romans. I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it's the power of God to salvation to those who believe, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. I'm not a Jew. I'm a Gentile, but the gospel is for me. The commissioned were the disciples then, and the disciples even today. But what's the commission? And we say, oh, I know what the commission is. I learned it again from the King James Version. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Now the New King James and most every other translation says, go make disciples. And again, that's a better translation. If you look at the original language, if you were reading this in the Greek New Testament, it would be a form of mathetes, mathetusate, which means go disciple. You're a disciple. Go disciple. And this message is to be carried into all of the world. Ethne. Now, you know what we get from that, don't you? Ethnic. Ethnicity. The Lord is saying, my commission is that you go everywhere, to every group of people, to every person, and make disciples out of them. That's my commission to you. I'm the commissioner. I have the right. You are the commissioned. Now go disciple everybody. I hear people sometimes say, you know, we need to take care of those at home before we go abroad. I don't read anything like that in Scripture. As if it's a choice that we can either go here or there. Our commission is to go everywhere. Of course we are to take care of those at home. There are people around our church building who need to be discipled. There are people who attend our services who need to be discipled. But that should not keep us from going to every ethnic group, to every person, everywhere. You see, those who had been taught had believed the message, and they had become followers of Jesus, and they were to be baptized. Baptism is a part of discipling. One of the things that we do to people who choose to be disciples is we baptize them because we've taught them, because we've dealt with their questions, because we've helped them grow to a point where they say, hey, I want to be baptized. We don't baptize people who have not already become disciples. Now that's a new thought, I think, for most people. But that's true to the text. Go disciple, baptizing them. Who? The ones you're discipling. The ones who've been taught and have gotten to that point in their lives where they see the necessity of being baptized. You see, by baptism, disciples were to come into the possession, the protection, and the blessings of God. Jack Lewis, in the Living Word Commentary, Brother Lewis was a brilliant, brilliant man. I understand he had 2 PhDs, one in Greek and one in Hebrew, one in Old Testament and one in New Testament. Very few people ever get 1 PhD, but here's a man who had 2 earned PhDs from prestigious universities. And when he wrote, I read. When he spoke, I listened out of respect for who he was and what he had done. And he said, it is by baptism that disciples were to come into the possession, the protection, and the blessings of God. And then he gave verses that talk about that. Romans 6:4 talks us about dying to sin and being buried in waters of baptism and raising to walk in newness of life. Galatians 3:27 talks about us being clothed with Christ. We're all children of God by faith, but as many as have been baptized into Christ have put on Christ. Now, what were we to do with the people we had baptized? Were we to say, you are a disciple, so good luck? We were to teach them to observe all things. A form of didasko, teaching. We are to be continued teachers. And I hope you understand that. I hope you get that. That I don't want to leave you wet and just freshly baptized. My job as I sit before you is to teach you all things that pertain to life and godliness. That's what we strive to do in our Bible classes. I would trust we would even do some of that one-on-one. But as we disciple people, we baptize them when they get to the point of understanding what baptism's all about, and then we continue that discipling process by teaching them all things that pertain to life and godliness. You see, disciples must always continue in the Word. Jesus said in John 8, if you continue in my Word, then are you my disciples, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. You cannot be a disciple apart from the Word. Otherwise, you'll die and shrivel on the vine and never become a dedicated adherent, a follower of Jesus. I think sometimes we've not understood that simple passage that we've quoted so many times and we've heard so many times. Go make disciples. Baptizing those disciples when they've been taught about baptism, and continue teaching them all things that pertain to life and godliness. Now, how can we create in the church? Seymour Church of Christ, 269 Business Park Lane, Seymour, Tennessee, 37865. How can we create a discipleship culture right here? Let me give you some suggestions. Let's have disciple-making sermons. That's my job, folks. That's my job. I take it seriously. I hope you know that. I think you do. To try to help us in the discipling process. To get from point A to point B. To become mature disciples of Jesus. Not to be left at the infant stage. Let's have disciple-making classes. We can learn a lot of stuff in a class that doesn't help us a bit in the world to grow as a disciple. And we can learn other things that help us grow to be healthy, mature disciples of Jesus Christ. How about small groups? One of the best disciple-making things we can do is get together in groups. You see, as I sit here and preach to this congregation, everybody here is somewhere in that process, but likely not at the same place. Nobody is on the same spot from A to B, from beginning to end. And it's hard to have a sermon that just meets everybody's needs. In a small group, we can do better with that. We have a ladies' class that meets on Tuesday night. A wonderful way for ladies to have fellowship, to study together things that relate to them in that group. I haven't been invited to that group yet because it's not for me. What about a men's group? What if we had a prayer breakfast once a month? And we got together and we, as Christian men disciples, prayed together, shared with one another, and came away feeling better. We have great youth groups. But sometimes in our youth group, we have everybody from somebody who's 7 to somebody who's 27. And it's hard to meet all of those needs. What if those groups were broken up into little smaller segments? What if we had a special class for young girls to be taught what it means to be a young Christian lady? Well, Mom and Dad will take care of that. Well, okay. You know what I've learned? That often Mom and Dad don't take care of that. And they learn from people who are hardly qualified to teach them what it means to be a Christian young lady. What about providing areas and encouragement involved in regard to involvement for everybody? What about putting everybody to work someplace? Do you know that one of our newest converts is taking care of the communion this month? I think that's remarkable. I don't want to embarrass her. But I think that's remarkable. That somebody who is beginning this process of being a disciple said, I can do that. I want to do that. Plug me in. Where can you serve? Well, I can fill a pew. That's not what we're talking about. Where can you serve? Where can you help disciple other people? What about raising the bar on expectations? I think for too long, folks, we've been too happy with letting people just show up occasionally and have a seat. And we don't say enough about plug in, get involved, do something, serve, be a disciple, help disciple others. You won't do that in the same way that everybody else does, but will you become a participant? You know, I have been on the field of competition a long time ago as a football player. Wasn't very good at it. Was big enough for one side of the line, but too slow for most runners who wanted me to block for them. But I learned something. It's a whole lot easier to sit in the stands and cheer and complain than it is to get on the field and play. That's where your mistakes are seen for everybody to judge. That's where everybody has an opinion of what you should do or not do. But the game is not played in the stands. The game is played on the field. Get on the field and play. How about confront sin and practice discipline? How about if we not just let people live however they want to live and just smile and forget about it because that's more numbers? What if we were to say, you can't live that way and be counted as a member here? Now, you certainly can come, and we would want you to come. But we're not going to treat you like you're a faithful brother or sister because you're not. You're living in sin. You need to confess it and quit it. That's hard-nosed, isn't it? Is that a part of discipling people? Getting them to live like they ought to? What about practicing mentoring? Where I just take on somebody. I just say, I'm your new best friend. I'm going to be there for you. You're not in services, I'm going to check up on you. You have something happy, I'm going to rejoice with you. Something sad, I'm going to cry with you. I'm mentoring you. It's one reason these little fellas up here on the first couple of rows, I rub their heads and call them my little preacher boys because I want them to be. I will encourage them to grow up and be all they can be, what they should be. Sometimes we have different names for this. Sometimes this is a Brother's Keepers program where I become my brother's keeper, my specific brother's keeper. And here's why. What's everybody's job turns out to be nobody's job. I had somebody tell me recently, I need to talk to you. I said, okay, we'll set up a date. She came back and said, I talked to so-and-so and I'm okay now. She talked to somebody she respected, who's mentoring her, who is her keeper. We need to do all that we can do, folks, to make this a discipleship culture where we come and be disciples and where we go and be disciples. There's not a lot of songs that have disciple in them, but there is this one, Live for Jesus, oh my brother, his disciple. ever be. Render not to any other what alone the Lord's should be. Live for Jesus. Live for Jesus. Give him all thou hast to give. On the cross, the world's Redeemer gave his life that thou mightst live. Come be a disciple. Go make disciples.